Hi guys, I'm at school where the Wi-Fi is pretty good, so I'm gonna make our video. 4 pages, bottom of 58 to 65. So you won't get to see my cats because they're at home, and sorry about that. I think we'll do the discussion again. That's going like super well. You guys have a lot of good comments on the discussion, so let's do that again. We'll make that the assignment, and then I'll try to get everything posted for next week like really soon, so that you know what pages we're doing and all that stuff. And then don't forget about your book club book too. And then I'm thinking, like if you're in Spanish and you have Mrs. Bontrager and you're doing that thing that she's doing where like everyone can like hear each other, I want to do that. Maybe we can have circle time sometime soon on that, whatever that is. So let's try to make it happen. Okay, so we're at the bottom of 58. Last time we read was when Ellie had the 25 lashes. And basically at this point, he's just telling some more stories about things that happened during the time that they worked at Buna, he and his dad. So we'll start at the bottom of 58 at the little page break, and we'll read till 65. Okay, here we go. I'm going to the podium. Here it is. It's the podium. Okay. One Sunday, as half our group, including my father, was at work, the others, including me, took the opportunity to stay and rest. At around 10 o'clock, the sirens started to go off. Alert. The Blockle test gathered us inside the blocks, while the SS took refuge in the shelters. As it was relatively easy to escape during an alert, the guards left the watchtowers and the electric current in the barbed wire was cut. The standing order to the SS was to shoot anyone found outside his block. In no time, the camp had the look of an abandoned ship. No living soul in the alleys. Next to the kitchen, 2 cauldrons of hot steaming soup had been left untended. 2 cauldrons of soup. Smack in the middle of the road, 2 cauldrons of soup with no one to guard them. A royal feast going to waste. Supreme temptation. Hundreds of eyes were looking at them, shining with desire. 2 lambs with hundreds of wolves lying in wait for them. 2 lambs without a shepherd, free from the taking. But who would dare? Fear was greater than hunger. Suddenly we saw the door of Block 37 open slightly. A man appeared, crawling snake-like in the direction of the cauldrons. Hundreds of eyes were watching his every move. Hundreds of men were crawling with him, scraping their bodies with his on the stones. All our hearts trembled, but mostly with envy. He was the one who had dared. He reached the first cauldron. Hearts were pounding harder. He had succeeded. Jealousy devoured us, consumed us. We never thought to admire him. Poor hero, committing suicide for a ration or 2 or more of soup. In our minds, he was already dead. Lying on the ground near the cauldron, he was trying to lift himself to the cauldron's rim. Either out of weakness or out of fear, he remained there, undoubtedly to muster his strength. At last he succeeded in pulling himself up to the rim. For a second, he seemed to be looking at himself in the soup, looking for his ghostly reflection there. Then, for no apparent reason, he let out a terrible scream, death rattle such as I'd never heard before, and with open mouth thrust his head toward the still steaming liquid. We jumped at the sound of the shot. Falling to the ground, his face stained by the soup, the man writhed a few seconds at the base of the cauldron, and then he was still. That was when we began to hear the planes. Almost at the same moment, the barrack began to shake. "They're bombing the Buna factory," someone shouted. I anxiously thought of my father who was at work, but I was glad, nevertheless, to watch that factory go up in flames. What revenge. While we had heard some talk of German military defeats on the various fronts, we were not sure if they were credible. But today this was real. We were not afraid, and yet if a bomb had fallen on the blocks, it would have claimed hundreds of inmates' lives. But we no longer feared death, in any event, not this particular death. Every bomb that hit filled us with joy, gave us renewed confidence. The raid lasted more than 1 hour. If only it could have gone on for 10 times 10 hours. Then once more there was silence. The last sound of the American plane dissipated in the wind, and there we were, in our cemetery. On the horizon we saw a long trail of black smoke. The sirens began to wail again. The end of the alert. Everyone came out of the blocks. We breathed in air filled with fire and smoke, and our eyes shone with hope. A bomb had landed in the middle of the camp near the Appelplatz, the assembly point, but had not exploded. We had to dispose of it outside the camp. The head of the camp, the logger Test, accompanied by his aide and by the chief capo, were on an inspection tour of the camp. The raid had left with traces of great fear on his face. In the very center of the camp lay the body of the man with soup stains on his face, the only victim. The cauldrons were carried back to the kitchen. The SS were back at their posts in the watchtowers behind their machine guns. Intermission was over. An hour later, we saw the commandos returning in step as always. Happily, I caught sight of my father. Several buildings were flattened, he said, but the depot was not touched. In the afternoon, we cheerfully went to clear the ruins. 1 week later, as we returned from work, there in the middle of the camp in the apple plots stood a black gallows. We learned that soup would be distributed only after roll call, which lasted longer than usual. The orders were given more harshly than on other days, and there were strange vibrations in the air. Caps off, the loggerel test suddenly shouted. 10,000 caps came off at once. Cover your heads. 10,000 caps were back on our heads at lightning speed. The camp gate opened. An SS unit appeared and encircled us. 1 SS every 3 paces. The machine guns on the watchtowers were pointed toward the apple plots. They're expecting trouble, whispered Juliak. 2 SS were headed toward the solitary confinement cell. They came back, the condemned man between them. He was a young boy from Warsaw, an inmate with 3 years in concentration camps behind him. He was tall and strong, a giant compared to me. His back was to the gallows, his face turned toward his judge, the head of the camp. He was pale, but seemed more solemn than frightened. His manacled hands did not tremble. His eyes were coolly assessing the hundreds of SS guards, the thousands of prisoners surrounding him. The loggerel test began to read the verdict, emphasizing every word. In the name of Reichsfuhrer Himmler, prisoner number stole during the air raid. According to the law, prisoner number is condemned to death. Let this be a warning and an example to all prisoners. Nobody moved. I heard the pounding of my heart. The thousands of people who died daily in Auschwitz and Birkenau and the crematoria no longer troubled me. But this boy, leaning against his gallows, upset me deeply. The ceremony, will it be over soon? I'm hungry, whispered Juliak. At a sign of the loggerel test, the lager capo stepped up to the condemned youth. He was assisted by 2 prisoners in exchange for 2 bowls of soup. The capo wanted to blindfold the youth, but he refused. After what seemed like a long moment, the hangman put the rope around his neck. He was about to signal his aides to pull the chair from under the young man's feet when the latter shouted in a strong and calm voice, "Long live liberty, my curse on Germany, my curse, my..." The executioner had completed his work. Like a sword, the order cut through the air. Caps off. 10,000 prisoners paid their respects. Cover your heads. Then the entire camp, block after block, filed past the hanged boy and stared at his extinguished eyes, tongue hanging from his gaping mouth. Capos forced everyone to look him squarely in the face. Afterward, we were given permission to go back to our block and have our meal. I remember that on that evening, the soup tasted better than ever. I watched other hangings. I never saw a single victim weep. These withered bodies had long forgotten the bitter taste of tears. Except once. The Oberkapo of the 52nd Cable Commando was a Dutchman, a giant of a man, well over 6 feet. He had some 700 prisoners under his command, and they all loved him like a brother. Nobody had ever endured a blow or even an insult from him. In his service was a young boy, a Papel, as they were called. This one had a delicate and beautiful face, an incredible sight in this camp. In Buna, the Papel were hated. They often displayed greater cruelty than their elders. I once saw one of them, a boy of 13, beat his father for not making his bed properly. As the old man quietly wept, the boy was yelling, "If you don't stop crying instantly, I will no longer bring you bread. Understood?" But the Dutchman's little servant was beloved by all. His was the face of an angel in distress. One day the power failed at the central electric plant in Buna. The Gestapo, summoned to inspect the damage, concluded that it was sabotage. They found a trail. It led to the block of the Dutch Oberkapo, and after a search, they found a significant quantity of weapons. Top of 54. The Oberkapo was arrested on the spot. He was tortured for weeks on end in vain. He gave no names. He was transferred to Auschwitz and never heard from again. But his young Papel remained behind in solitary confinement. He too was tortured, but he too remained silent. The SS then condemned him to death, him and 2 other inmates who'd been found to possess arms. One day as we returned from work, we saw 3 gallows, 3 black ravens, erected on the apple plots. Roll call. The SS surrounding us, machine guns aimed at us, the usual ritual. 3 prisoners in chains, and among them, the little Papel, the sad-eyed angel. The SS seemed more preoccupied, more worried than usual. To hang a child in front of thousands of onlookers was not a small matter. The head of the camp read the verdict. All eyes were on the child. He was pale, almost calm, but he was biting his lips as he stood in the shadow of the gallows. This time the logger capo refused to act as executioner. 3 SS took his place. The 3 condemned prisoners together stepped onto the chairs. In unison, the nooses were placed around their necks. "Long live liberty," shouted the 2 men. But the boy was silent. "Where is merciful God? Where is he?" someone behind me was asking. At the signal, the 3 chairs were tipped over. Total silence in the camp. On the horizon, the sun was setting. "Caps off," screamed the lauderdale test. His voice quivered. As for the rest of us, we were weeping. "Cover your heads." Then came the march past the victims. The 2 men were no longer alive. Their tongues were hanging out, swollen and bluish. But the 3rd rope was still moving. The child, too light, was still breathing. So he remained for more than half an hour, lingering between life and death, writhing before our eyes, and we were forced to look at him at close range. He was still alive when I passed him. His tongue was still red, his eyes not yet extinguished. Behind me, I heard the same man asking, "For God's sake, where is God?" From within me, I heard a voice answer, "Where he is, this is where, hanging here from this gallows." That night, the soup tasted of corpses. Sorry for the depressing pages today. We'll do the discussion again, and I'll try to get the cats in the video next time because I know that this is way more boring without cats. And I'll try to get everything posted for next week too. Hopefully we can see each other soon.